Can you hear me well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let me welcome everyone who's just joined us today, WBS Leadership Dialogues. And my name is Maurice Khatebe. I'm the head and the director of Wits Business School. And I'm really pleased that, first of all, I think we should all clap hands for I think as we engage as South Africans, they are teaching us a very good lessons. We can be the best in the world, and I'm very proud of them. And I think all of us needs to emulate them. Engaging in public dialogue is a core part of our mission at WBS. And in the past 2 years or so, we've hosted some of this country's most celebrated and influential business leaders. Leadership is what we are all about here at WBS, where our goal is to graduate the next generation of leaders who are agile, ethical. This is because we need both skilled and ethical leaders and leaders that have got a passion to make a difference, to take us to the Africa that we want, but even more importantly, an inclusive and sustainable future of the entire planet, as guided by the 17 goals, sustainable goals as set up by the United Nations. I believe that SDGs should be top of mind of all of us as leaders, because they provide us guidelines necessary for the direction we want the world to take, and also give us a sense of purpose. I always challenge our students here at Wits Business School that each one of us must choose one or two of the 17 goals and dedicate your entire professional life in achieving those goals. Because I believe that if each one of us do that, cumulatively will make this world better than we found it. Our leadership dialogues at WBS provide a platform for individuals who have demonstrated impact, and we are purposefully aligning ourselves with leaders who share our values. And our values are absolutely clear: diversity, inclusion, ethical, and a passion to make a difference. And these leaders are people who have become our role models. That's the reason why I am so happy and privileged to introduce today a trailblazer and a role model, Ms Yolanda Cuba, Vice President of MTN Group for the Southern and East African region. Ms. Cuba is was one of the youngest CEOs of the JSE-listed company at the age of 29. Prior to her current role, she served as a Group Chief Digital and FinTech Officer at MTN. She's a former CEO of Vodacom Ghana and was also Group Chief Strategy Officer at Vodacom Group, covering South Africa, Tanzania, Mozambique, DRC, and Lesotho. Her 20-year career spans not only telecoms, but corporate finance and operations. She has been recognized a number of times by global organizations, including being selected by the World Economic Forum as a global young leader. Yolanda is a chartered accountant who's passionate about education and inclusive social and financial development. She's the founder of Mentorship Boardroom. I like that. A platform where trailblazers mentor the next leaders in Africa. I think we need to talk a lot about that after this session. The Mentorship Boardroom aims to impact 1 million lives in Africa, of which 70% will be women and children. Thank you, Yolanda, for taking time to chat with us today. We're very pleased. We feel privileged to have you on this platform. I'll hand over to our seasoned and a veteran leader at Business School of Professor of Strategy, International Trade, and also the Director of Partnership at WBS. My friend, brother, go for it, Professor Mills. Unmute, my brother. Unmute, my brother. Unmute.
Oh, I'm muted. Thank you very much, Prof. Hadebe, Director and Head of School at West Business School. My name is Mil Soko, Professor of International Business and Strategy at West Business School. And I too welcome you all to this WBS Leadership Dialogue. As Prof. Hadebe mentioned, since we started this dialogue series, we have been fortunate to have been able to get to know several inspirational leaders in business and academia. It is an honor for me to be able to facilitate these conversations. Thank you, Maurice, for introducing our guest today, Yolanda Cuba. I too have been looking forward to this conversation. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. You will have an opportunity to ask questions of our guest. Please use the Q&A box to write your questions or comments, and I will relay them to Yolanda. In case you miss anything, this event is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel. Yolanda, thank you very much for joining us this evening to share your insights about your personal journey and career.
Thank you so much, Mels, and thanks, Prof. Maurice, for all those wonderful words right at the beginning, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Right. The first question I want to ask you, Yolanda, you know, you have a very impressive CV, and we're very proud of you. You've done very well. You have traversed an admirable career trajectory that has cemented your status as a formidable business leader, not only in this country, but also across the African continent. And when you look at your career, one can trace the origins of this remarkable career path to when you were appointed at the age of 29 as one of the younger CEOs of a JSE-listed company. What was it like to hold the most senior position at Absa Group at such a young age?
Thank you so much for the question. It was remarkable. That's really the response to that. However, I mean, even more remarkable for me is actually what preceded that. That was the end point in what was a journey of about 3 or 4 years. So I joined Mvelapanda in 2003, in January 2003. And later that year, they were doing succession planning. I was not even aware that they were doing succession planning. I wasn't even aware that there was anything that had my name on it in the conversation. I wasn't the most senior person and next in line. However, I was actually, one day I was called in, and I was told, Yolanda, you are being considered as one of the candidates to be as a deputy CEO as part of our long-term planning. And I was like, you mean me? And they said, you. And I was like, so excited. And they're like, no, slow down. You know, we didn't say you were appointed yet. We're saying you're a candidate as one of the deputies, the deputy CEO position in the company. And I went home and I was super excited. I thought that was the biggest achievement ever. So yeah, and for me, I guess that journey of actually being there at such a young age, I was about 25 years old at the time, and really actually being thrusted into environments where literally, I mean, I had no right to be there. I mean, I remember walking into the boardroom of Absa at about the age of 26, and it was full of people, and none of them looked like me. And all of them look at least 30 to 40 years my senior, and you feel out of place. However, you have people in the room that are legitimizing you, that are actually saying, you belong here, and we want to hear your voice. And so for me, I guess that formed the kind of leader that I also became, which is, how do you empower others? How do you take others along? How do you actually bring the entire kind of nation with you as you go through, because my success I really owe to a lot of people that actually believed in me.
You currently serve as vice president, responsible for Southern and East Africa region at the MTN Group. What does this role entail within the company? What exactly do you do?
Okay, so the simplest way I would describe it, I would say I'm a regional CEO. I look after a number of countries, and basically my job is to take what is our corporate strategy from a group perspective and translate it into an operational plan for all the countries that I actually look after, and therefore actually achieve what the business has actually put as the key strategic pillars for our business. And in doing so, it means that there are three things I actually have to achieve. One is the operational delivery, right, for all those businesses across the board. The second thing is to build shared value, right? And for me, that's an important pillar of what we do at MTN, is actually making sure that we actually don't find a country in a sea of poverty and leave it like that. We are not the only people prospering in that sea of poverty. And so that shared value model is an important part of my job, to say, actually, how do we build sustainability? When we talk about MTN as a champion for Africa, how do we live that? How do we actually show up for that? And the third element is actually building leaders, building our own people in order to have the best that we can possibly have on the African continent. And for me, every time someone says, MTN has the best brand in Africa, we are the best employer in Africa, we are this, I'm super proud, because it means we are not just doing the operational stuff and the commercial stuff, we're actually building the nation where we actually operate as well.
Yolanda, you've held senior leadership positions in several industries, including telecommunications, beverages, investments, banking, and consumer goods industries. How would you describe the transition, from one industry to another? And does each industry require a specific skill set? And how did you manage to adapt to the different businesses?
Absolutely. Each industry actually requires different skill sets, right? I mean, there's no question about it. You actually have to show up differently for each one of the industry. The first thing you have to determine in whichever industry you're in, it's whether you are going to go into that industry, play a driver role, a support role, or a expertise role, where you are an expert in the field, right? And for me, that was the first kind of determinant wherever I've gone, is actually determining what does my role actually constitute. And in so doing, it actually told me the level of pivot I required for that particular industry. So, and for me, I mean, I've as you said, I mean, I started my career in marketing when I was 21 years old. My first job was at Robertson's, Spice People, and I was in marketing. And then I transitioned to finance. I did so many other different things, and basically understanding how we make money and what is important to this organization. So at every business that I've gone into, the first 2-3 days, I'm having a meeting with the finance community, either the finance director or someone just below the finance director, and asking, how do we make money, right? And then the second meeting that I have is with our infrastructure providers. So in BIA, it's normally manufacturing. In MTN, for example, and Vodacom and others, it was the people, the technology people that were putting up our towers and so on. And basically, I want to know, how does that work? What do you connect to what? When someone says, this is a switch, I don't think that it is a switch on the wall, right? And so these are things that are important to actually understand. It's what is the infrastructure that produces income? And then on the other side, and then I want to understand, how do we actually record income? That once you understand those two, then it's easy then to start yourself You don't need anyone. You start doing a DuPont, right? I call it a DuPont because that's how Norman from SAP taught me. And basically, what are the drivers then of that industry, right? And for me, understanding the drivers of the industry, understanding the drivers of performance, then is what I tend then to start focusing on. And that's how I've managed then to pivot, because it told me, what skills do I need? What's the level of pivot I need? What's the level of adaptability I need? And then I'm super, super curious. I tell people I've institutionalized curiosity, right? My level of curiosity allows me to unlearn and learn, right? And I do that all the time, iteratively. Right now, we are in the world of AI, in the world of all these new technologies. And that's what I'm immersing myself in. I'm an accountant by profession, but these are the things that are happening around me that I am learning and unlearning and relearning other skills. And that's what really has helped me to traverse all these different kind of spaces.
Yeah, fascinating. Yolanda, you hold a number of very impressive academic qualifications. I'm looking here, including degrees in accounting and statistics from UCT, as well as KwaZulu-Natal and Pretoria universities. You're also a qualified chartered accountant, as well as an alumna of the prestigious INSEAD Business School. How did these academic qualifications prepare you for a career in the corporate world?
So I'm going to start at the beginning and say the first degree, which was in statistics, it hardly prepares you for a career.
Yeah.
What you learn, what at least I learned, I mustn't generalize, what I learned in my first degree is an ability to learn, right? That's what I learned, right? And if you ask me honestly, how much of that did I use in my first job? I think our first employers should be paid for taking us on, because literally they spend the first year actually just training you up to be useful to them, right? Because your degree on its own is not sufficient, right? And so really it's really about actually learning to learning how do I actually add value, what is important, what's not important. When I read a textbook, I mean, the one thing that I always tell people is that when you are in high school, you're taught to parrot learn from cover to cover a textbook, right? When you go to university for the first time, you actually have to be selective, because you can't read those textbooks this big that you write, Mills, right? in just 4 months, it's impossible, right? For most mere mortals. There are people that are special that can do that, but you have a couple of these textbooks to learn. So you have to be selective. You have to be tuned into listening. So you actually start developing new skills that you most probably are not consciously learning, but those are actually beginning to be ingrained in you. And that's what you learn in your kind of first degree. The second degree is really around, then for me, it was around specialization. I was like, okay, I need to be known for something. I can't just be like just a generic kind of qualified for nothing, right? And so I decided accounting was the way to go. And then I went into accounting, and really I enjoyed accounting, but I never wanted to spend a day as an auditor, right? Once I qualified, I said, now and no more, right? And so that became a springboard for me, rather than a qualification that I milked for what I would say the actual qualification itself. That's where I learned the skills. I did my articles. When you go into your first job after that, you actually have the skills. And then maybe, I mean, after that, the things like INSEAD, the executive programs and things like that are things that you do now because you want to add to self, right? Because now you've been working, you understand what your gaps are, and you start saying, actually, where do I need to develop? And the best thing I did for myself is going to INSEAD back in 2010. And then last year, I actually went to Harvard Business School to do the advanced management program as well, right? And that, again, was around honing my skills, actually understanding that the world does not stand still. There's been so much change in the last 10 years that I actually felt very strongly that I needed then to actually keep up with what was going on. And that's really how I would say my qualifications have added, I guess, to my employment. Now I seek for solutioning for me, whereas before it was just something that was actually given to me as a generic kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. Our special guest, Yolanda Cuba, Vice President, Southern and East Africa Region, MTN Group. So members of the audience, if you have a question or comment, please type it in the chat box, in the Q&A box. The chat box is not working today, so we're using the Q&A box. And I will relay it to her. Now, I want to talk about MTN now, right? So you get appointed to this very, challenging position of driving MTN's business on the African continent. And when you are appointed, you described your role at MTN as being to assist with the strategic expansion of the network's financial services and digital transformation. And perhaps if you could explain what this means for the benefit of our audience, and also just explain how you've gone about doing this, and talk about your achievements and setbacks. So what does this mean? It seems like this is very technical for a lot of people, so you need to explain this, but and how you've gone about doing it, and what have been your achievements? Have you been able to achieve your strategic priorities since you took over?
Yes, thank you for the question, Mills. I mean, I must be honest. I mean, that's a very MBA response. That is there, right? However, in practical terms, when I talk about the three things at the beginning that I spoke to, right? What are the three things that I shall be measured on and my legacy will be measured on? The first thing is, did we connect more people in Africa, right? Did we connect more people in Africa? Did we actually financially include more people in Africa? And the answer is yes. So my job is to make sure that we roll out the network for many, many, many Africans, as many Africans as possible in particular on the continent. So if I look at, for example, in Rwanda this year, we finally launched 4G that we didn't have in that country because 4G was limited in terms of our license conditions. We are not allowed to do that. We finally did that, and we've accelerated our data penetration as a result. That means more people have access to internet than before, right? And for me, that is one of the biggest measures of success. We've done the same thing in Uganda, we've done the same thing in Zambia, we've done the same thing in Eswatini, and so on. And when I look at the overall kind of map of our connectivity, in most countries, we are somewhere between 96 and 99% population coverage, right? In terms of our connectivities. So for me, that's the success. To take a country like South Sudan, which is the newest African country on the continent, that is hardly 10 years old, and actually be able to build infrastructure for them. And actually, the one thing that I always say is South Sudan actually had 4G before most countries because we chose that should happen, right? We said, no, they can't be left behind. We can't be telling them that they must live only in 3G just because they were the latest in the evolution of a new country. We said they must actually accelerate. The second thing is we look at the platforms. At MTN, we call it the platform businesses. Our platform businesses is a company our business like FinTech. South Africa is more financially included than most of the other countries in which we operate. So those who are in banking, you would be disappointed to know that after over 100 years of formal banking, so actually almost 150 years of actual formal banking, the banking sector only managed to include less than 30% of the population. With mobile money, in all the countries in which we operate, we actually are managing to include closer to the 70% that were previously excluded. And this is really about giving financial services on people's phone. So basically what you do is you use people's phone numbers as a basis for them to actually get financial transactions. This can be anything from their normal peer-to-peer kind of transfers. It could be anything from remittances. Remember, a lot of Africa still receive money from the diaspora into their countries in order to be self-sufficient. Families are dependent on remittances from the diaspora. We have insurance, we have loans, we have savings, we have all sorts of services, all on the phone. And the technology on which it is based, this is the most amazing thing, is 2G technology, right?
Yeah.
It didn't wait for 3G, 4G, 5G, where everyone has a smartphone. It didn't wait for that. It actually worked for basic technologies. And by doing what we did, that innovation allowed us then to financially include more and more people. When I joined MTN, I think we had about just shy of 30 million, and that was in 2020, just shy of 30 million fintech subscribers, 30-day active subscribers. Today, we're boasting closer to 70 odd million fintech subscribers across the African continent. So for us, that is what we call financial inclusion and financial progress. And that's really around what my first pillar, which was around the operational kind of excellence in doing things around operations. The second one was around shared value. Shared value means allowing the local people in that country to participate in the benefit that we reap as MTN as well. So about 2 years ago, we listed MTN Rwanda, and so locals could participate in the success of MTN. About a year and a half ago, we listed MTN Uganda, and that again allowed locals to actually participate. In fact, the other day I was talking to one of our directors who used to be the CEO of the JSE, and I said, in fact, I think Uganda, because of mobile money and the phone, we allowed people to actually subscribe for shares using their Momo account, their mobile money account. They registered, they did everything using their phone because they don't have the infrastructure to go to the post office like we used to do when there was Cecil in Zalo and things like that. And they don't have the number of bank branches to be able to handle that. So what we did it. So as a result, I think we have more retail investors in Uganda than we do in South Africa, as sophisticated as South Africa is today. So, and that's because we said, we want even the mom and pop shop in the little corner of nowhere to actually own a share of MTN. So that for me is around shared value. Some of the things that we've done around shared value, around our people. I think someone once mentioned how we have actually taken a real deliberate step around transformation and inclusion. And one of the areas is around women empowerment and women inclusion. And, you know, in my region, we actually have 40% of the CEOs being women, for example. So these are some of the areas where I'm super proud because these are things that we've achieved in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, well, that's very impressive, Yolanda. You know, you run MTN's business on the continent together with your colleagues, and you have said yourself, and I agree with you that, you know, Africa is not for the faint-hearted. All right. Yeah. MTN operates in several countries on the African continent. Recently, a number of South African companies, including ShopRite, Game Stores, and MPEC, you know, have shut down their operations on the continent due to several reasons, all sorts of reasons, you know, including currency volatility, weak consumer demand, and regulatory issues. From MTN's perspective, do you think Africa is still an attractive destination for investment? And you know, how has MTN fared in the continent, and what are your future plans? I'm interested. I think we have spoken about how you've done, but what are your future plans? So, is Africa still an attractive investment destination? And how has the company fared, and what are your future plans for the continent? And then after this, I'll come to some of the comments and questions that have been sent by members of the audience.
Sure thing. Yes, I mean, we look at Africa as still as an attractive proposition. We used to be in 22, 23 different countries, Middle East, Africa, and so on. And we actually started divesting away from a number of countries, including the Middle East and so on. And to say we want to focus on Africa. That's our home. We understand the dynamics on the continent, and therefore we want to grow with the continent. Our strategic intent as MTN is very clear, is that we want to lead Africa's progress. So as a pioneering force, it means you actually have to go where others dare not go.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I mean, when I speak to my team, sometimes I tell them that if we are the ones not investing in 5G, that means that country would be left behind.
Yeah.
Right? And so it is incumbent on us to be the ones that are willing to take the calculated risks to be able to actually go to where others don't go. So how do we see our investment case as MTN? How do we see the investment case for Africa? Maybe to pick on a few things that I jotted down. We see the youth demographics of Africa as a positive force for the future. We think innovation will come from Africa. What we are busy actually trying to grapple with is how do we organize for it? But that it shall come, it will come. It might be slower because we are less organized as a force than not, but it shall come. If I look at what countries are doing in terms of diversifying their economic kind of landscape, you know, every time a country actually says, you know, we are a mining country, we are this country, however, we want to go into, we have the intention of going into manufacturing, into more technology, into more this, you know, I gain hope. I gain hope that in 20 years' time, right, the future will be different. It will not be what it is today. When I look at financial inclusion, I get more hope that actually more and more people are getting into the mainstream of the economy instead of being on the periphery or just in the informal or subsistence economy. And that will help the economy actually grow overall in terms of Africa. So, I mean, I look at, for example, intra-Africa trade, which is your space, Mills, you know, which is almost nothing, nothing, right? And you actually say to yourself, at some point, this will gel, right? We don't know which point is that, but at least we are seeing the positive steps towards actually organizing for it. And for me, these are the kind of headlights that I'm looking for and saying, okay, my flags are starting to look green. How do I actually continue to push in that direction? So for me, the case for Africa has many green shoots, right? Unfortunately, not all of them are blooming at the same time. And that's a problem for another day. You know this better than me. No. But I think we've got an Africa that is most probably at the lowest point that it will face in the next 50 years. And the next 20 years will start actually showing us what we are really capable of as a country. So those are the things that sort of for the African case I would make for us. Do we have currency volatility? Yes, we experience the same thing as the other guys. Do we have regulatory challenges? Yes, we do. We have governments that change. We have conflicts. In one of our countries, Sudan, you woke up one day and there was a conflict, right? So these things do happen. However, when we say everyone deserves the benefits of a modern connected life as MTN, as our core belief, that's what drives us every day to actually be able to do what we do. You know, I tell people often that my business card, actually, although my official title is vice president, you know, my business card actually says my position is chief champion for Africa's progress in the CEA region, right? That's what it says on my business card. It's not my official title. I'm Madam VP, right? but I am literally the chief champion for Africa's progress. And that's what gets me up every morning to do what I do.
Yeah. Now, I need to get your business card, Yolanda. All right.
I'll give it to you.
Okay, so quite a few comments and questions. Peter Ongiare, a great interview. I admire his skills set and growth in leadership. And there's also a comment from Bulelo Kibudu, who says, a great corporate journey, Yolanda. And it's encouraging to see accomplished corporate leaders from the grassroots. Then there's a question. Do you have a pen there, Yolanda, in front of you?
Yes, I do.
So a couple of questions, which I will relate to you. Notando Masike. What inspires you and what advice would you give young people like myself who want to occupy senior positions in the corporate industry one day? That's from Notando. And then there's a question from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, what is your take on embedded finance? Hopefully you know what that is.
Yeah.
Embedded finance. Then there's a question from Nomakosazane Jonas. And the question is, Yolanda mentioned delivering shared value as one of the 3 key objectives that define her output, and further shared examples regarding local participation. How did Yolanda and her team get shareholder buy-in when implementing SV shareholder value initiatives? So we'll take those 3 for now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let's start with what inspires me from Notando. What inspires me, I mean, if you go to my LinkedIn page, what you will see is that I'm a chief champion for digital and financial inclusion. I want to build better leaders. I started the Mentorship Boardroom because I want to build better leaders. And inclusion is something that is core to who I am and that inspires me. When I see someone who I used to mentor like 20 years ago doing something great, I'm like, yes, that's what it's about. So if you actually meet anyone that's been mentored by me, they'll tell you something. They'll say, Yolanda will ask you what to do, right? That is my thing, right, with them. Is that, you know, at the end of the day, you must be known for something. Otherwise, history will not remember you. By the way, neither will the present. But, you know, but history will not remember you. So I get inspired by bringing out the best in people. But when I talk to my teams, my direct reports, I tell them that I'm not here to build followers, I'm here to build leaders. Because the more we build leaders, the easier it gets to accomplish whatever we need to do. So that's what inspires me. And what advice would I give you for someone who wants to be in senior positions? Okay, the first thing is you actually have to be visible, right? You know, I mean, you know, COVID has done something that I don't understand, but, you know, people go to meetings and they switch off the camera. Do you know someone that you don't see, you forget? I'm not sure if you guys know, right? But I promise you, you become forgettable. You come into that basket that says these are the forgettables. And the people that tend to actually remember is people that are present. So your visibility is important, but your visibility mustn't be empty. Your visibility must be based on execution and excellence. And your execution ability is your say to do ratio. When you say something, as my boss would say, and your do ratio must be absolutely on point. A lot of people say a lot of things, but don't deliver, right? We actually have to consistently deliver. And you must always be dissatisfied with anything that looks like it's mediocre. Because if you are not dissatisfied with how you did something 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and you're still doing it today, you are being left behind. That's the bottom line. So for me, it is really around honing your skills, being clear around where you want to go. I said back at a point in time, I had a wonderful mentor called Simon Sussman. Simon Sussman is the guy who was the CEO and then the chairman of Woolworths, their family, the Woolworths people. And he said something amazing to me. This is after I was 29, I was riding high, I was a CEO of a listed company, you know. And this guy who's my mentor says, Yolanda, anyone can be a shooting star, but what's going to make it sustainable, right? And I had to sit and think hard about what was going to make me sustainable. Had Simon not asked me that question, right, I would have never sat down and said, actually, I want to learn repeatable models of success from who? From companies like SAB, right? That's how I ended up in SAB. I didn't end up at SAB by mistake. I called SAB, I called SAB, I called MTN because I said, these are African companies that have done it. And they've done it over and over again. How do I get that skill to do it over and over again? So I called them. There wasn't a job waiting for me. SAB created an executive director role for me after we had a conversation, right? It didn't happen by which I applied for a job. No, it didn't happen like that. So you must be clear about what you want to achieve and why you want to achieve it, and then go knocking on those doors. So actually, if you sit and take no action, it doesn't work, right? If you plan and take no action, it also doesn't work. And I hope that gives you great advice for you in terms of what to do. Seek out people that can help you along the journey. I've had incredible mentors, as you've heard. Who are the mentors for you? Who are the people that you listen to? Who are the people you are gaining inspiration from? So that's important. There was a question, the second question was around, anonymous, around embedded finance. What do I think about embedded finance? If there's transparency around embedded finance, it's fine, right? If there's no transparency, then there is a problem. That's my view on embedded finance. But, you know, there are books like Nudge that have been written in the past, right? Where you ask people to opt out instead of asking them to opt in. And we know that when we actually ask people to opt out, the opt-in ratio actually shoots up, right? Very few people actually press that button that says, I'm going to opt out of this. And so embedded finance is a little bit also like that sometimes. So transparency is the key in terms of that. Does it help other people? Yes, it does, right? Yes, it does. So I hope that answers your question, Anonymous. If I haven't answered it, please let me know. And then from the question on shared value, how do we think about shared value and how do we get buy-in? Luckily at MTN, the board, first and foremost, and the group exco, which is Ralph and us as the group exco, right? We fundamentally believe in shared value. There is no African kind of background, let me say that, or heritage that does not have at its core sharing, right? Because we came from an environment where sharing, because we're subsistence farmers and so on, that sharing amongst family, amongst community was the thing to do. Ubuntu was a thing to do. So we said we do not want to be far from our heritage. And that's where we started off from. And the buy-in on shared value wasn't difficult for the organization at all, across the line. And our values as well then were aligned to what we then wanted to achieve. What we articulated as our values at MTN then became what we actually transposed into the world, right? When you speak to an MTNer, most MTNers will tell you that MTN's core belief is that everyone believes in that everyone deserves the benefit of a modern connected life, that we want to lead digital solutions for Africa. Almost every MTNer can actually tell you that. They can choose any one of our 5 values and say, this is the value I live by, right? And that can be anything, the old values which can do and all those things, and into the evolved values that we have today, where we've actually said, when you lead, you just don't lead, but you lead with care, right? And basically balancing some of these things that actually leadership on its own can be cold. You know, you can be about telling and driving and so on and forget that people have families. People, for example, during COVID, had to actually look after families had to be at home and they teaching children and so on. And we realized that we had to play up the care part, not just the leading part. And these are the things that as MTN, we've actually been able to do and actually learn from and say, this is now shared value. When COVID hit, the first thing that the EXCO did, they said, we're not sure what the future is going to hold, but we are going to sacrifice our salary increases so that we can put this into a pot for people whose families are not on medical aid. Because remember, you might have your immediate family as in medical aid, but you always have extended family around you that are not on medical aid. How do we help you, right? And these are some of the things where we demonstrate the values that the organization actually stands.
All right. I'll come to more comments and questions from the audience. The question I want to ask you now, Yolanda, has to do with transformation, and we've been following what's happening within companies and especially MTN. And over the past few years, particularly under the leadership of Ralph Mupita, the group CEO, your boss, MTN has made tremendous progress, right, in terms of advancing, especially gender transformation, racial and gender transformation within the organization. And personally, I've called Ralph to commend him, for his leadership on this. And this has been demonstrated, for example, by the elevation of women to CEO positions in several African operations. What factors would you say this success can be attributed to at MTN? Especially the gender transformation agenda, and what has MTN done differently, which other companies can emulate in this respect?
Yeah, so MTN has been really deliberate about inclusion, right? And saying, what does inclusion entail? And inclusion actually entails the transformation where you actually bring in women as part and parcel of your leadership and your organization in general. So from an MTN perspective, we actually made a commitment around this. And that's the first thing that you actually have to do. You actually have to make the commitment and actually be happy to have it out there and say, I want 50% of my organization to be women, right? At all levels, right? And that was the trick. It was to say at all levels, right? Because we know a lot of companies in the junior kind of space, there's a lot more women. And then you say, no, overall our company is 50% women. No, that wasn't good enough for us. We actually were very clear. And Ralph was very clear in terms of what he wanted to achieve from a woman perspective. So, and then what he did, he said, I would demonstrate that this is possible, right? And how he demonstrated that it is possible, when I joined MTN, maybe a year before I joined MTN, there was only one EXCO member that was female. It was Felen. She was head of regulatory at MTN Corporate Affairs and Regulatory. Only one. It was a Black woman. Her name was Felen. Is Felen, right? And yes, by the time, fast forward now, 2 years later, 2.5 years later, there is the group CFO, who is a woman. There is head of legal and regulatory, our general counsel is a woman. Now this is Group EXCO, right? The people that look after the entire system, right? And then there is VP, which is me, that is woman, coming in as first as FinTech and digital officer from a group perspective. And then there is our new head of corporate affairs and sustainability, who is a woman. So you've got 4 women that actually from one in the group EXCO, right? What does that do? When you live and do, right? That say-do ratio that I was talking about, when you say you're going to do something and then you do it, and keeping it that high, it forces almost the system to start following the same. And that's what's happened. So when I was looking to appoint people as CEOs in my region, what did I do? I did exactly the same, right? I went and I found women that are super capable to actually put into positions, right? And that for me is the trick. When people say, no, there are no women. There is no such. There is no such, right? There are capable women, but you must be willing to go out and find them. Sometimes it's not easy, but you have to go out and find them. So there was almost that kind of subliminal pressure around say-do kind of ratio that filtered down in the organization. So right now, our biggest challenge is on finding technology skills, women technology skills, right? Because there are fewer women actually in that space than in the other spaces. However, our commitment hasn't changed. We said we want to actually move this number from this 38% to 50%, right? So we're still committed to it. So we've got programs within the organization, Women in Tech and others, that are there to cultivate specifically capabilities within that space and find ways to accelerate and expose women to new opportunities. In fact, I remember one of the women leaders, one of our CEOs, Mitwa, who was in, used to be in Rwanda. She says, when she came into Rwanda, the number of women that applied for roles, actually, she was lucky if she found 2 women applying for a role, whenever there was a role advertised at all levels, right? And she actually started something around WIN, which was Women in the Workplace, Women Network in the Workplace, right? And by the time she left the organization 2.5 years later to be a CEO in another OPCO, the number of women that were applying for roles were more than 50%. Right? So unfortunately, women still think they need some form of booster before they can apply. And we actually have to understand that we can't just say, no, women must know that they must do this. We actually have to provide the support system that allows for the confidence for women and the validation for them to be able to apply.
Very interesting, very interesting. Thank you. I've got a question, and then I'll move on to, I'll ask 4 questions, one from myself and another one from 3 questions from Joel Nube, right? So my question, Yolanda, is, you know, as a corporate leader, you've led and managed large and diverse teams across different geographies and business units on the African continent, including in countries such as Ghana, Uganda, Mozambique, DRC, Tanzania, and Lesotho. And the question is, you know, from your experience, what are the key ingredients for building functional and effective teams? That is my question, right? And the question from Joel Nube. Joel has got very interesting questions, 3 questions. One is, you mentioned financial inclusion. How do you think banks should work with organizations like MTN to drive this agenda? Right, that's an interesting question. And the second question is, how do you see artificial intelligence being an enabler for the mobile industry? And the third question from Joel, what is the main challenge you've had to overcome to rise up the corporate ladder? So those are the 4 questions, 1 from me and 3 from Joel Nube.
Okay, perfect. Okay, yeah, on your question, how do you build functional teams?
Yeah, and effective teams, yeah.
And effective teams. The first thing is understanding that people are different, right? First, seek to understand your team before you actually are driving your own agenda. So what I tend to do is actually spend time with the team, ask them questions. Actually, I am a very informal leader, so it's easy to draw out people a little bit more. This one had twins. This one has a child that is in boarding school. This one has a child that is in university in a different country, and so on. I know those facts about my team, right? And because people actually tend to follow leaders that care. So what is your demonstration of care? So for me, that's important. Care is one of the big kind of issues that I start off with. The second one is you have to have a compelling vision for the team, right? Unfortunately, the vision thing is not something you can delegate. You can test with the team, but it's something that you should own as a leader. And for me, that's something that I own as a leader. So that's my second thing, is around how bold is your vision? And also people at a certain level, right, start only being motivated, not only by money, but by actually adding positively either to themselves or to their environment, which is society and so on. And I make sure that embedded in my vision for the organization, right, that is in there, right, on the programs that we choose to do and so on, so that people always feel attached to a bigger whole. So they know, they are clear why are they here and what impact they can make. I hold my people to account. We agree something. See, for me, it's important that when you agree something with someone, then you work hard to deliver that. I come from beer where, I mean, Norman used to say almost like literally that your budget is cast in blood, right? So literally, I mean, by the time I walk away from something that I can't do or that the team can't do, we have to demonstrate that we gave it our all. You can't just chop and change just because it gets a little bit harder, right? It is at that point when things get a little bit harder that innovation actually starts to happen, right? And that for me is an important part. And I give my teams enough room to say, you can make mistakes. We can actually do something wrong and I'll cover you. However, show me that you were committed to the outcome that we were looking for, that we agreed. And also I spend a lot of time coaching. My team will tell you, I spend a lot of time coaching because I'm building leaders. In my role now, it is not only about doing, it is also getting other people to do. But you have to make them do in a way that actually encourages them and motivates them, and that it actually almost come in organically almost from them, that this is now their passion point to actually make this better than what you would have done. So those are some of the things that I use. I mean, and in my mentorship, I mean, last week I bought one of my leaders, for example, a book that I believe that he will benefit from, right? And this is one of my leaders. And I said, and when I gave it to him, I said to him, you know, there's a chapter in this book that says, there are no bad teams, just bad leaders, right? And I said, you know, the reason I'm giving you this book is because when I read that chapter, it meant that it is my job as a leader to make you better. You might be going through a slump right now, but my job as a leader is that I have to make you better, because there's no bad teams, but they're bad leaders, right? And I told him on another kind of the other parts of the book really only deal with what I want him to learn: more accountability, more ownership, more this, more that. And I told him why I was giving him the book. And that's important because mentoring and coaching actually is what makes people more comfortable and actually also be likely to take more risks and more kind of opportunities also in the future. So that's how I deliberately actually build teams, effective teams. And then on the questions from Joel, financial inclusion and banks, as telcos, we definitely don't operate in isolation to the financial system, including the banks. We have to find a better way to actually collaborate. So in the products that I was talking about earlier, for example, when we talk about lending, about savings and so on, these are products we do with banks. Those are not done on our balance sheet. Those are done on the balance sheets of banks. We've got partner banks where we keep our money, and they are the ones that facilitate the movement of e-currency, effectively, or e-money in the system. So we are actually tied at the hip with the banks. Are there more things we could do if we actually had to think a lot more creatively? Absolutely, we can do a lot more than what we are doing today. And AI as an enabler, absolutely. You know, AI can solve our everyday problems, and also can help solve our more complex problems. So today, our networks are actually filled with AI applications, right? You know, I tell people, for example, when you pick up your phone and you take a photo, right? That thing, it's got AI in it, right? It actually is using technology AI to actually optimize the environment, optimize the lighting, optimize all these things for you. So it is invisible kind of AI. So we talk about generative AI as if it's something out there. It's something that we already are living with today. When you go onto your phone and you go and you try to find, for example, on MTN, what is my next best action, right? We use a lot of AI in order to actually give you a segment of one. So we can now actually isolate you from the average, because remember what we used to do a long time ago. We used to take people who are like this, who are in this LSM, and divide it by the number and say, okay, you fit into this, so we're going to give you this because you fit in with these million people or 10 million people. Now we take your specific data and we isolate it, and we actually use algorithms to actually give us an output about what you are likely to actually accept from us, where are you likely to accept it, and how are you likely to accept it. So all these things are happening in the background already. And we think there are still even more applications that are coming in our operations. I don't think people should be doing budgets anymore. That's my view as an accountant, because I think we spend thousands and thousands of hours being wasted on preparing budgets that we know are going to be wrong at the end of the year, right? And so why are we doing it? So why can't we get machines to help us to do this? Because the data is there, right? And when you've built the data lakes already, so at MTN, we've built our data lakes already. We've got a platform called EVA. We've got a platform called Adam, which is the advanced analytics that sit on top of that data, that gives us the output that we want and analyzes the big data for the outputs that we want. And so these are the things that are actually happening. And as we get more sophisticated, then the applications that we do. Remember, with AI, you know, the truth is now with technology in general, the limitation is your own thinking. It is no longer the technology. So yeah, there's a lot there to gun up for. It is a big enabler of what we do. And what has been my main challenge in corporate? Okay, I would say was probably is I got to where I was because I was the technocrat. I was a really good technocrat, right? And then at some stage you get thrust into a leadership position. In my first week as a CEO, I remember actually calling my mom and saying to her, I never realized people had so many issues, right? It's about people. For the first time, you realize it's about people. And that change actually was a lot for me, you know, and this is where I actually had to go and almost relearn so many things, right? Because I wasn't used to it. I was used to actually speaking to people when I actually tell them that we need to put a put here, we need to put a call option here, we need to do that. They understood, right? Now all of a sudden you're speaking to a broader kind of spectrum of people. They think you're speaking Greek. You know, my first evaluation after being a CEO was from my chairman, was that, Yolanda, you must not leave people behind, right? Take people along with you. Right now, you are far ahead of you. In fact, there is a little note piece of paper that I have on my phone that comes from 2004, right? 2004, that Tokyo wrote to me in a meeting, right? So I was sitting in a meeting, we'd take a break. It was one of those kind of big board meetings. And he wrote a note to me and he said, you are a star. However, speak a little tad slower. And he laughed, right? And what he was telling me, he was reminding me of that very fact, that actually your arguments are cogent. There's nothing wrong. We can't fault anything you say, but just be careful that you're not leaving people behind. And for me, that's important. I mean, at 2004, I was a kid. So these things were really important to hear at that stage in my life. So that transition to leadership, I must be honest, was most probably the biggest challenge that I've had in my career. And then corporate-wise, there's been many issues. I mean, issues when you operate in the kind of environments we operate happens almost every day. So you actually have to build a resilience factor in you that is able to deal with some of these issues. We wake up and, you know, we have a country that says you must switch off the internet, right? Yet, as MTN, we have digital human rights as a core principle and a foundation of what we do. And that includes not actually switching people off. What do? You know, you go into a country and you're speaking to stakeholders. They like your policies can't be above our constitution, and you can't be, you know. So those debates get very interesting very quickly. So yeah, but you know, it's that comes with the territory, to be honest.
All right. There's so much interest in this conversation, and I see the flood of comments and questions which I'll come to before we conclude. We have just over 20 minutes left. Let me ask a question about your leadership approach, Yolanda. You yourself, you have described yourself as a hands-on leader who's constantly learning, tech-savvy, and fearless in your decision-making. That is how you have described yourself, right? It's not me.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay, so the question I want to ask you is, can you please explain to us how these qualities have served you well as a leader?
So, I mean, we live in a world full of ambiguity, right? And the least of which now, I mean, I'll pick one, which I don't want to expand on, is the reaction to the Palestinian-Israeli issue versus the Ukraine-Russia issue. We live in a world of contradictions. So one of the things you have to be able to do is internalize ambiguity, right? And for me, the learning and unlearning is to actually constantly be willing to change my views when presented with facts, right? And for me, that adaptability is what I draw on in terms of my leadership qualities, in terms of what I am as a leader. My level of curiosity ensures that I learn history from eons ago. I mean, I learn about slavery in America. You know, I learn about Frederick Douglass, right? And say, who is Frederick Douglass? Why was he important? What did he do, right? And I will not only learn about our own heroes in South Africa, I would not only learn about what was the thinking in 1957 by Nkrumah and so on, because it is important for us to actually base everything that we do on some level of foundation. And it is that level of foundation that you create for yourself. Whatever you believe, it doesn't matter, but base it on something solid. And that is what actually drives me. When you've done that, right, and you've added capability and all these other things onto yourself, when it comes to decision, you are fearless, right? I am fearless in decision making because I believe that leaders are there to make decisions. You cannot delegate. If there's one thing a leader cannot do, is delegate decision making, especially when things get really, really tough. I make calls when things get tough. You can count on me to make things happen when things get tough. Easy decisions, oh, you can make it, it's okay. But when things really get tough, that's when you can rely on me to be there with you. And one thing that I tell, for example, my teams is I am with you. When I'm saying I'm with you, I am with you. To my boss, when he asks for something, it doesn't matter what it is. There are only 2 words that I give to him, right? And the 2 words that I give to him, it's only 4 letters on those two. It's only 4 letters in those 2 words. On it, on it, on it. And once I say on it, my boss knows that he doesn't even have to check up again. It is done, right? And so that's the kind of world I live in. We live in a quick changing world within the telco space. And so you do not have time to be following up with everyone on what they are meant to be doing.
Yeah.
And that's important, that in an ever-changing environment, in an environment where there's ambiguity, decision-making is absolutely paramount, because your job now is to provide certainty.
Yeah. All right. That's I agree with you on that. You know, you want to lead leaders. Leaders want to lead leaders. Right. Loiso, there's a question from Loiso and Nwemla. And Loiso, how do you navigate corporate politics? Yeah. And the importance of your social capital in your current performance, how you navigate corporate politics. Good question. And then Chandra Snyders, what are some of the ways that you have overcome the doubt of your own voice, right? And Mulalo Makungo, Yolanda, through your many interactions, through mentoring and coaching, do you believe that leaders are born or made?
Okay, well, okay, let's start with Loiso, corporate politics. Yeah, so everywhere you go, there will be some form of what people will call corporate politics, right? It is up to you whether you participate or not, right? That's the choice that you have. And one of the choices that I made a long time ago is that I will not participate in corporate politics, right? I'm here and I'm getting paid to do a job. I exchange my labor and my resources for money. That's what I do, right? And I have to deliver to the best of my ability in order to earn what I get given. And so it's important just that you sort of situate yourself in a space where not everything that you hear will destabilize you. Because what corporate politics do is that they serve only to destabilize, right? You start doubting the things that you are even good at yourself. And for me, that's why I decided a long time ago I would not participate. So if I were you, I would, if there is something directed at you, respond to it directly, be unambiguous about it, and actually ask someone, is there something that I've done that actually has led you to concluding in this way? Or actually finding it easy for you to say something like this about me? Can we have coffee so that I can explain how A, B, or C has happened? So confront it directly so that you kill it. That's the way to deal with any kind of corporate politics. That's my advice. Chandra, around doubt. Yes, there was doubt, right? There was absolutely doubt. Let me tell you just a 2-minute story. Just before I became a CEO, I was still deputy CEO at the time, and I decided that, you know what, I've just accelerated really fast in this corporate thing, and so I went and I looked for an executive
We seem to have lost you there. Oh, yeah. All right. You're back.
Yeah, I'm coming to you to see if you can help me fill these holes, right? And we had that discussion in our first session, right? In the last session, so we had 10 sessions together. In the last session, Belinda asked me, Yolanda, have we actually achieved the objectives? So we had 3 specific objectives that we ended up with. And she asked me, do you feel like we've achieved our objectives? On this one in particular, I said to Belinda, I realized that I never had holes to start off with, right? And that's what doubt is, right? You feel like you've got these holes, but no one else sees these holes. The people that appoint you into these positions, they appoint you because they see something in you You did not appoint yourself into these positions. When I went onto the board of Absa, for example, as a non-exec, I was still a kid. But I didn't appoint myself. It was all these older people that appointed me, but they wanted me there, right? And when I joined Absa as a director, I was the youngest director. 12 years later, when I stepped down in 2019, I was still the youngest director, right? And and at that time, I had been chairman of this, I had been done this, I've done that, I've been audit committee, risk committee, board finance committee, making big decisions as a chairman because they trusted me, right? And I had to learn to trust me. And that is the big lesson in it. So there will be times of doubt. And when you are in those times of doubt, remind yourself that you didn't appoint yourself there. People saw something in you that you could deliver according to whatever position they put you on. Are leaders born or made, right? This is the famous kind of question of all times. It's both. It's both. There are people that are natural born leaders. Guys, we cannot get away with that from that. But leaders in the main are nurtured into leaders, right? Great leaders have had other leaders actually work with them. So if you listen to very carefully in the story of leaders, right, you will hear in their narrative how a teacher, how a sports coach, how a this actually impacted them as they were growing up, what was being said about them at the time when they were growing up, and to encourage them, to actually give them opportunities, let them sit at tables that they were never meant to sit on, just to encourage them. So, which means there is a nurture element that actually comes with leadership. So you can have both, but my view is the better leaders are actually nurtured. Sorry to say, if you think you're only a born leader, sorry, but you know, the nurtured leaders tend to be my kind of leaders.
Yeah. Yolanda, you know, with all the changes that have happened over the decades, you know, the rapid global changes, you know, climate change and the legacy of COVID, you know, the trade conflicts, you just spoke about geopolitical conflicts, all that, you know, we are under immense pressure as businesses and business schools and other interested parties to hone a new set of leaders, you know, skillful and effective leaders to manage the contemporary challenges. What kind of leaders and managers do you think are needed today? What is a typical DNA, or you know, or the attributes of a leader that you're doing a lot of this mentoring and so on? What is it that is required today in terms of attributes and the DNA of a business leader?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, in terms of attributes, firstly, I mean, I think of leaders as people that are broad. So I've got a framework that I stole from someone, right? That says you have to first be an ITM, right? You have to be a capable leader. So that means skills are important, right? So, and your skills are ITM. I is deep. So if I just draw a 1, right? That's my I, right? And then I draw a T across, meaning that you not only have to be deep in terms of your knowledge, but also you have to be quite wide. You have to have horizontal kind of knowledge as well. And then to make even a better leader, then you have to close down that T and I with 2 sides that make it an M, right? And people that tend to be more successful are people with multiple sector or multiple skills in different spaces, right? You are a finance person, you are a technology person, you are a FMCG person, marketing and all these other stuff. Because the world as we see today actually is not as siloed as it used to be. So leaders who are actually building multiple capabilities are the ones that are actually likely to succeed. They are the ones that are likely to join the M, so that you take the functional skills, the deep kind of skills, and you combine it with sort of the generic kind of horizontal kind of playground, so that you are able to actually play hard. The second thing we need adaptable leaders, right? So in terms of key characteristics, if you are not comfortable with ambiguity, you're not going to survive. If you're not comfortable with learning, you're not going to survive, right? That's how simple it is. So we need to create that level of curiosity, ingrained kind of hunger for knowledge and hunger for learning, and applicable learning, not just any learning that you can apply to problems, right? Because if it's just general learning, okay, I can watch TV, I can do that, right? Anyone can do that. However, if you are interested in leaders of the future, they must actually have that. The third thing is that we operate in a context, right? The social agenda, the social fabric is now what is missing. I mean, a few weeks ago, I spoke at a university at UCT where I was, which was my first, where I did my first degree. And they had called me as an alumni to say, how do we think about the future of the university, right? And what did we do? What didn't we do? And I said, one of the things that you guys didn't do for me when I was at varsity, right, is that you didn't make me socially aware. You didn't make me socially sensitized. You taught me a lot of stuff around how I can make it into the top 5% anyway, right? You gave me the confidence, you gave me the technical kind of capabilities, but no one actually sensitized me, because I would have been a better leader much sooner had you actually inculcated that earlier in me. Maybe I would have started the Mentorship Boardroom instead of only a few years ago. Maybe I would have started it 20 years ago, because I would have recognized that there is no prosperity, as I said, in being the only successful person in a sea of poverty and squalor around you, right? So for me, those are some of the key attributes that we need in terms of our business schools and also of our universities actually going forward. And the solution orientation, we are good at defining problems, right? I mean, we have PhDs at defining problems, right? However, what we do not have is a PhD at executing solutions. So if there's one thing I would say is we have to have a solution orientation. If you go to the US, right, and you go and attend any of the business schools there, or any of the technology schools there, one thing that will hit you almost immediately when you're there in your first day is how everyone think they can be something in the world. They can be the best with Zoom in the world. They can be the best telephone maker in the world. They can be a best pen maker in the world. And, that level of confidence around, I can execute the best in the world, not best in the US, not best in my state, not best in my kind of close environment. It's best in the world. And for me, that kind of change in orientation is really important. And lastly is around integrity, ethical behavior in leadership. I think we can spend more time on that. I mean, when I attended the business school at the end of last year, I mean, the amount of time we spent on corporate responsibility and accountability was unbelievable. And I think we can do more. The case studies we did around the kind of fine lines that leaders are making for effectively countries and communities, without bearing in mind their corporate responsibility and accountability for those decisions is unbelievable. So for me, those are some of the things that I would say today. I mean, when last week I was watching the news and there were kids that were getting sick because of expired food and all those kind of stuff, right? And I was sitting there and asking myself, how many of our general business leaders, now forget what was happening there, business leaders are willing to actually sell the equivalent of expired food, right, to societies in order to make a profit, right? And I mean, that thing is still playing in my mind, but the point is that sense of corporate responsibility and accountability is, I think, a piece that is still missing general in some of the leaders I get to meet.
All right. We have 3 minutes to go. So the last 2 questions, very quick questions. Yolanda, you're very busy. I struggle to find you.
Don't mention how many years. Don't mention it.
No. But how do you relax? I mean, you are all over the continent. You're very busy. You're very busy. How do you relax? And the last question will be: where do you see yourself in the next 10 years in terms of your career?
Okay, let's start with the how do I relax? I tend to watch movies, go out with my kids, do mindless things. I watch Barbie movies and things like that, really mindless stuff. And during COVID, by the way, when everyone was learning a new skill, others were cooking, others were doing this, and gymming and don't. I decided also that I'm gonna learn a new skill. And my new skill was learning how to fly planes, right? So I learned how to fly planes during COVID. So at least I acquired a skill, and with a lot of leadership lessons in trying to be a pilot. I haven't qualified as a pilot. I stopped last year when everything started becoming a little bit messy in my life. But that's something that I did. I mean, I do things like that just to keep me off just working. And then where do I see myself in 10 years? Short answer, retired.
I don't believe you.
On a couch with my feet up.
I don't believe you. All right. We could be listening. So that's how we come to the end of this afternoon's conversation with our guest, Yolanda Cuba, Vice President, Southern and East Africa Region, MTN Group. Yolanda, thanks hugely for your sharing with us such illuminating, informative, enriching, and educative insights. And thank you for your leadership and service to our country. In closing, I would like to thank everyone in the audience who attended and participated in this event. I would like to thank, in particular, my colleagues at WBS and MTN who have worked behind the scenes to make this event a reality. From WBS, Medupi Lamula, Jayton Carson, Alison Gayla, Tembe Gatachwayo, and Rihadu Makama. And from MTN, Nompumelelo Mdindwa. Thank you, everyone, and good evening. Sebulela Siswam, Enkosi.
Enkosi Mills, thank you so much. I really appreciated it. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everybody. Take care.